Yeah, we mentioned this earlier that, for 10,000 years, we as humans we use commodity-based money.
Yeah.
So it used to be salt and stones and like wampum and things like that. And then, gold and silver naturally appeared as we naturally opted into the gold and silver system because it was the best form of money, we could create. And now Bitcoin is, in my opinion, the best form of money humans have ever created. So I think we eventually opt in. I think it's just natural. We as humans will naturally opt into this Bitcoin system once people understand it.
Yeah.
And right now, only about 1% of the world understands it. But as the other 99% of the world, through work that you do, through your podcasts and your, my wife calls it bitangelizing. As you tangelize about, Bitcoin, the world understands.
Yeah.
And as more and more people understand this, we'll just opt in.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to have 100% of my money in dollars. Maybe I'll have 90% of my money in dollars and 10% in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And then eventually you just get more and more.
And over time that flips.
And over time,
Yeah.
it's just natural progression. And I don't think there's really anything that could stop it.
Yeah.
It could be slowed down. Governments are trying to slow it down. Banks are trying to slow it down. So, and that's fine, but they can't stop it. And over time, it just occurs.
Yeah. And this is because you're fighting the tide of individual self-interest, right? Because you're basically saying what Bitcoin is just let people keep what they rightfully earn, right? And keep it in something that can't be expropriated by others. So there's this very strong game theoretic force basically that drives people into it. And although I agree that the evangelizing and the podcasting, like these things help spread the message, I still think kind of ironically, the ultimate evangelizer for Bitcoin is going to be the state, right? The more they print money, the more they try to regulate, confiscate, control, like the tighter they grab, the quicker individuals slip between their fingers into Bitcoin. It's like, because people don't like to be controlled or robbed or manipulated. So as you try to apply that pressure, they figure out Bitcoin, right, as a means of self-preservation.
I think Justin Trudeau was the best Bitcoin salesman ever invented, right?
Right.
I mean, a couple of years ago when he was cracking down on the Canadian truckers, confiscating their bank accounts.
Yeah.
I mean,
which was just declared unconstitutional, I heard the other day.
Yeah. I mean, he was the best Bitcoin salesman we've ever had.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And China, I mean, so many things. China outlawing Bitcoin mining, right? There was the longest time there was the FUD about, all the Bitcoin mining's coming out of China. Bitcoin is like a Chinese psyop or something. And then what happens? China outlaws Bitcoin, hash rate goes down, 40% in 6 or 8 months. Those miners get unplugged, shipped elsewhere, plugged back in. Hash rate has now rebounded, 400 or 500% since then.
All-time highs.
Decentralized hash rate outside of China, but hash rate's now at a new all-time high. And so every time the state, this is where we do sound like we're in a cult when we say everything's good for Bitcoin, but every time the state tries to harm Bitcoin, it proves that it's anti-fragile by becoming stronger or hardened through the hostility. And I don't know, it's hard to imagine what can be done to stop it.
So where do you think that hash rate's coming from? It can't be the public miners that we know about. I mean, a lot of it's from that, but I really think there are countries or militaries that are mining Bitcoin right now.
I would imagine so. I mean, because it's not a difficult thesis to absorb. That's right. Like if anywhere you have energy production that's not being sold, well, you should plug in a miner. Otherwise, you're just letting cash burn, basically. So, especially in centrally planned economies where they've built all this excess energy capacity, I'm thinking like the Three Gorges Dam in China, all these ghost cities they have. That's because they centrally planned all that, right? There wasn't a demand for it. That's why they built all of this, and it's uninhabited, it's unused. Well, what's the perfect complement to that is you can now sell all of that energy into the Bitcoin mining network. So I would imagine, again, speculation, I don't know, places that have had excess expansion of energy production capacity due to central planning are probably figuring out, we don't have anywhere to sell this energy now, but we can mine Bitcoin instead. And to your point, we've seen hash rate.
I'm going to throw this out there. It's just, I don't know how to figure this out, but maybe one of your listeners does. But if you look at the U.S. Navy, and they retire their nuclear ships and submarines, right? So there's a nuclear power plant on those. You could easily co-locate, when these ships are retired, right? They're mothballed. You could easily take those mothballed ships, put some Bitcoin miners on them, put those out in sea somewhere, and be mining Bitcoin with that nuclear reactor, right? And I don't know how to track that, but looking at the hash rate tells me that there's military power mining Bitcoin right now.
Yes.
And I don't know where it's coming from, but that seems a pretty logical place, like taking these nuclear reactors that are mothballed and reactivate them and go out there and mine Bitcoin. And if you look at 7% of the Bitcoin network, it goes to a un-KYC'd wallet. So that's a government.
Yeah.
That's a government mining Bitcoin, put it in their unKYC'd wallet, and it's 7% of the network. That's $20 million a day of electricity. Wow. So you have to be pretty big entity to afford $20 million a day of electricity.
Yes.
So I think it's government. It's some government out there taking their unused, their mothballed electricity and mining Bitcoin with it.
That's a fascinating thesis. Makes a lot of sense. And I would say too that if that story is ever corroborated or confirmed, that's going to trigger a gigantic arms race by every other country in the world, right? If it was determined the U.S. were doing that, every other superpower in the world would be like, holy shit, we have to also go do that now. And that's, again, back to the game theory. It's like every time you see someone else making use of this money or this network in a way that's advantageous to them, it's an incentive for you to take it more seriously, whether it's you as an individual, as a company, or as a nation state.
Right. And Jason Lowry, he, in his book Software, which you can't get anymore, by the way. Yeah. So, Software, read that. I mean, that spells out the incentive for militaries to go out and be Bitcoin miners. It's a way to protect cyberspace, just like the Air Force protects the air and the Navy protects the seas. Bitcoin protects cyberspace.
Yeah, it's fascinating thesis of his. He's been on the show a number of times, and his book is banned, so there's a good signal to go out and read it. Say, what has this journey meant to you personally? Like, how has it changed your life? How has it changed the way you see the world? Obviously, it's got you putting a lot of skin in the game, producing the God Bless for Bitcoin documentary. Like, how would you describe your experience journeying into the Bitcoin rabbit hole for those that may have not yet embarked on that journey?
It's made me pay more attention. Like, when I was pre-Bitcoin, I didn't pay attention. I was focused on other things. And when you start to understand what money is, you realize that, as David Bailey puts it in the movie, you're getting screwed, and, I just feel like that wrong needs to be righted. And so that's my mission. My mission is to help educate people on how, the reason that they're experiencing pain is because they're working so many hours and they're still accumulating debt and they can't keep up. And people are like, they're thinking to themselves, I'm doing everything right, right? I'm working. I went to college or I went to trade school and I'm being responsible and I still can't keep up. And so they don't understand what's happening to them. So that's the point of the movie is this is what's happening. And it doesn't have to happen to you. There's an alternative. You could opt out of that system and, you have a choice. So, but you need to understand what's happening to you. And that's, that's my goal, is just to help educate people. Like, you don't have to go through that pain. There's another system you could opt into. We take our time, energy, talent, earn money, government taxes it, and then they go and they spend that money on these, what I think are unjust wars. But then in addition to that, they print more money, which silently steals from us through inflation. And they use that money too. So a great example I give is, if the government came to you and said, Robert, I want 30% of your net worth, and we're going to go to some foreign country and kill people with it. You'd probably say, I'll opt out of that. I'm trying to give you 30% of my net worth. Right. But what the government does, what they've done over the past 4 years, they printed 30% more US dollars and they conducted wars with those. And so basically they did it without your permission. That's right. And so you still have that same $1,000 balance in your checking account, but that $1,000 balance only buys you $700 worth of goods today. So they stole it, and you just don't recognize it. Yes. And so that's the point in the movie, that through inflation, through printing more dollars, they're able to go do these wars. And if we were on a Bitcoin standard, then they wouldn't be able to do that. They're not going to give the government your Bitcoin to go do wars. And that's the way it used to work. When wars were conducted hundreds of years ago, when you ran out of gold, the war ended. That's right. Right. And so now the wars don't end. We have everlasting wars because they just keep printing more and more money. The war in the Middle East has lasted for 20 or 30 years. That's right. It's just never ending. So and we when I ran the numbers, this was years ago, but at the time, let's say this was in 2020, we had the cost of the war on terror, quote unquote war on terror, which is really just this imperialistic campaign by the U.S. in the Middle East. I think it was $2.5 trillion at the time. By coincidence, we had printed $2.8 trillion in that exact same time frame. So it's like we printed the whole cost of the war, which means we robbed savers to go and blow up people in the Middle East and serve the interest of defense contractors, oil industry, whatever.